Chapter 12, International Trade and Exchange Rates. These are the main facts about U.S. trade in 2007. The U.S. has a trade deficit in goods. A trade deficit occurs when imports exceed exports. In 2007, the U.S. trade deficit in goods was $816 billion. The U.S. has a trade surplus in services. A trade surplus occurs when exports exceed imports. In 2007, the U.S. trade surplus in services was $107 billion. Principal U.S. exports are chemicals, agricultural products, consumer durables, semiconductors, and aircraft. Principal U.S. imports are petroleum, automobiles, metals, household appliances, and computers. The largest U.S. trading partner is Canada. In 2007, the U.S. had a trade surplus vis-à-vis such countries as Australia, Belgium, and Netherlands. The U.S. had a trade deficit against most countries, such as Canada, Germany, Japan, Mexico. The largest trade deficit U.S. had was China, $257 billion in 2007. Despite U.S. trade deficit, it is the second largest exporter in the world. 8.5% of the world exports in 2007 were provided by the U.S. Germany was in the first place with 9.2% of the world exports. Specialization and trade increase the productivity of a country's resources and allow for greater total output and income. Specialization results in more efficient production. Comparative advantage allows us to determine who should produce what. Comparative advantage is a lower relative or comparative opportunity cost than that of another person, producer, or country. The terms of trade, or the rate at which units of one product can be exchanged for units of another product, can make both countries better off. Consider an example of the U.S. and Mexico producing avocado and soybeans. Suppose Mexico can produce 15 tons of soybeans if it does not produce any avocado, 10 tons of soybean, and 20 tons of avocado, etc. If Mexico produces only avocado, it can produce 60 tons. The U.S. is bigger, thus it can produce more of both goods. 30 tons of soybeans and no avocado, 20 tons of soybeans and 30 tons of avocado, etc. 90 tons of avocado and no soybeans. If each country produces both goods, say in alternative C, then they can produce a total of 57 tons of avocado and 28 tons of soybeans. However, if they specialize, Mexico producing only avocado and U.S. producing only soybeans, the total output will be 60 tons of avocado and 30 tons of soybeans. In the above example, the U.S. has an absolute advantage in producing both goods. The U.S. can produce 30 tons of soybeans while Mexico can produce 15 tons. Also, the U.S. can produce 90 tons of avocados compared to Mexico's 60 tons. The U.S. has a comparative advantage in soybeans. For the U.S., producing 1 ton of soybeans costs 3 tons of avocado. For Mexico, 1 ton of soybeans costs 4 tons of avocado. Soybeans are relatively cheaper in the U.S. Mexico has a comparative advantage in avocados. 1 ton of avocados costs 1/4 ton of soybeans in Mexico, which is less than the cost in the U.S. 1 ton of avocado costs 1/3 of a ton of soybeans. If the U.S. specializes in soybean production while Mexico specializes in avocado production, and both agree on the terms of trade, the rate at which units of one product can be exchanged for units of another product, both countries will gain from specialization and trade. The United States can shift production between soybeans and avocados at the rate of 1 ton of soybeans for 3 tons of avocado. Mexico can shift production at the rate of 4 tons of avocado for 1 ton of soybeans. Suppose that, through negotiation, the two nations agree on terms of trade of 1 ton of soybeans for 3.5 tons of avocados. These terms of trade are mutually beneficial to both countries, since each can do better through such trade than through domestic production alone. Before specialization, Mexico produced 24 tons of avocados and 9 tons of soybeans, while the U.S. produced 33 tons of avocados and 19 tons of soybeans. With specialization, Mexico produced 60 tons of avocados and the U.S. produced 30 tons of soybeans. Mexico sold 35 tons of avocados to the U.S. in exchange for 10 tons of soybeans. After trade, Mexico had 25 tons of avocados and 10 tons of soybeans, 1 ton of each more than before trade. The U.S. had 35 tons of avocados, 2 more tons than before trade, and 20 tons of soybeans, 1 more than before trade. Thus, both countries gained from specialization and trade. If resources are no longer perfectly substitutable between alternative uses, resources less and less suitable to the production of one good must be allocated to the production of the other good in expanding that other good's output. The primary effect of increasing opportunity costs is less than complete specialization. A foreign exchange market is a market in which foreign currencies are exchanged and relative currency prices are established. An exchange rate is the rate at which one currency trades for another. Buyers and sellers interacting in international markets will exchange currencies through the foreign exchange market. In the market for foreign currency, the intersection of the demand for foreign currency and the supply of foreign currency determine the exchange rate. The intersection of the demand for pounds curve, D1, and the supply of pounds curve, S1, determines the equilibrium dollar price of pounds, here $2. That means that the exchange rate is dollars per pound. The upward arrow is a reminder that a higher dollar price of pounds, say $3 per pound, caused by a shift in either the demand or the supply curve, means that the dollar has depreciated. The pound has appreciated. The downward arrow tells us that a lower dollar price of pounds, say $1 per pound, again caused by a shift in either the demand or the supply curve, means that the dollar has appreciated. The pound has depreciated. Depreciation is a decrease in the value of a currency relative to another currency. Appreciation is an increase in the value of a currency relative to another currency. Factors that cause a country's currency to appreciate or depreciate are tastes, relative income, relative price levels, relative interest rates, and speculation. One frequently hears the following 3 arguments for protectionist policies that restrict trade. Restricting imports, say proponents of protectionism, saves U.S. jobs. The truth is that while import restrictions alter the composition of employment, they don't affect total employment, but lead to less effective resource allocation. Another argument is that cheap foreign labor pulls down wages in the U.S. We learned that gains from trade are based on comparative advantage. Specialization through trade increases labor productivity and wages in both countries involved in trade. Finally, protectionists argued that tariffs are needed to protect against dumping. Dumping is the sale of products in a foreign country at prices either below cost or below the prices charged at home. While it is true that dumping has negative effects, it is prohibited by most countries that impose anti-dumping duties. Cases of dumping are therefore rare. Most countries enter into international trade agreements and form trade blocs. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, was formed in 1947 by 23 nations who agreed to give equal treatment to one another, to reduce tariffs through multinational negotiations, and to eliminate import quotas. The World Trade Organization, WTO, formed in 1993, included 152 nations as of 2008. The WTO oversees the provisions of the current World Trade Agreement, resolves disputes stemming from it, and holds rounds of trade negotiations. The European Union, EU, is a trade bloc that included 27 European nations as of 2008. The EU eliminated tariffs and quotas among members, established common tariffs for imported goods from outside the member nations, reduced barriers to the free movement of capital, and coordinated on other economic policies. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, was formed in 1993 and is a free trade zone of U.S., Canada, and Mexico.